Well, thank you all so much for being here again. Like Mitchell was just saying, we have probably all had an access point where we have seen animation in some way, shape, or form, whether it's cartoons, movies, other things. We know there's a lot of Disney fans in the world, et cetera. And so as we start our conversation today, since we've all have kind of a common base, I bet there's a lot we don't know about it, especially with the artistic side. And so what do you think that we should know about how animation got started?
Okay, well, yeah, and I think it's important. You kind of have to go back to some of those early years, because the great thing about the early years of animation is that it was all innovation. It was all so new, and how are we going to do this? How are we going to make this work? So you can't really talk about the early days of animation without talking about the Fleischers, Max and Dave. They were contemporaries of Walt Disney. They came up with characters like Coco the Clown, Betty Boop. They did Popeye and Superman, you know, that kind of thing. They said they were contemporaries of Disney, but they were more of a kind of an urban, grittier side of Disney, a more New York side of Disney, as opposed to Disney was the more cleaned up California style of animation.
So when you say gritty, what are we talking about here? What do you mean by that?
I would say like more artsy New York. If you were to compare Bugs Bunny to Goofy,
Okay.
you know, Popeye to Mickey Mouse,
Yeah.
you know, Daffy Duck versus Donald Duck, you know, that kind of thing. A little more slapstick,
Yeah.
a little more attitude. And it's actually that kind of slapstick attitude that led to, you know, the Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry and all those things that we wouldn't have had really without the Fleischers.
Yeah. Well, what were some of the innovations, especially artistically or with technology, that we can attribute to the Fleischers?
And that's the thing. Fleischers were definitely innovative. They came up with three main things, I think, that were super important for the time. The first was a rotoscope machine. And what that was is that up until this point, animation was very stiff. And so there's a lot of nuance in the way a character moves and the way people move. And they were kind of missing a lot of that. So Max kind of cobbled together this machine out of old car parts and an old projector and that kind of stuff. So he can film something, a person acting, and then they would project it frame by frame by frame onto this glass plane with a piece of paper, and they could actually use that movements as reference for their animation. And it was actually pretty crazy. So the first thing they did was they had Dave Fleischer dress up in his clown costume, because he was a clown on the side over at Coney Island.
As one does.
As one does, you know. And so they had him do some things. And
Same, you know.
it's pretty crazy how clean, especially for the time, the movement in the animation is. I mean, it moves very natural. And it was something that kind of blew people away, because they weren't used to having something move so naturally. And it was that rotoscope machine, which is interesting because Walt Disney used it to train its animators and really get the movement right. Don Bluth did it, and it's kind of a precursor to the motion capture that we see today in a lot of the Marvel movies and that kind of thing. The next thing that was a really big innovation for them was phonofilm, which is they'd have the film strip and then the audio right there connected to the film strip. And that had been around for a little while, but connecting that to animation was near impossible. No one knew how to do it. So the Fleischers came up with, you know, those sing-along things that got to follow the bouncing ball.
Yeah.
Okay. They invented that, and so
wow.
they kind of animated that ball bouncing, you know, along the words so that the audience could kind of sing along, and they were able to do that, which hadn't really been done before. The first one they did was My Old Kentucky Home, and this was 2 years before Disney did Steamboat Willie, which was a lot of people kind of attribute that as the first cartoon that had sound to it. When really the Fleischers had done it a couple of years before and kind of worked all that out.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. The last
Everybody loves audience participation with like the bouncy ball and all that. We've all probably done.
Oh, yeah,
we won't make you all do that tonight. So this is art, not music.
Oh,
so,
sorry, that was actually going to be the next slide. So it's pretty crazy. The other problem that animation was having was that it's very flat. So you have a flat background that you paint, and then you take at the time anyway, plastic celluloid and put your character on that, and then you lay it on top of the background. So everything's very flat. So you pan the background across, like the characters move along, and it moves very, very flat. And so the big thing that everyone wanted to figure out, how do we make this three-dimensional?
Yeah.
How do we make this something that looks more like our characters in an environment? Well, the Fleischers came back with the stereoptical process, or the setback camera. And what they would do is they'd have complete sets that they built, like they'd model a complete set. and then they'd have a pane of glass which they put their celluloid and their character on, and then they could have other objects in the foreground to make it feel like it was actually in a three-dimensional set.
Huh.
And it was really revolutionary at the time. So I brought a little clip here, and I want you to pay attention to the background. Once they start panning, you see it move because it is actually a three-dimensional object. And then they also have the Popeyes in the midground. He's a two-dimensional object, and then they got three-dimensional objects in the foreground, just kind of blurred to kind of really set him inside it.
It makes him seem so much more real.
Oh yeah, and it's crazy once it starts moving there, is that they had to line up each drawing with the set as they moved it along.
Yeah. But
it definitely gives it a whole three-dimensional feel that they didn't have before, and they couldn't really figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Now, a couple years later, Disney came up with its own version, the multi-plane camera, which was just planes of glass. And then you had paintings on each of those glass, and you can kind of slide them at different rates to give the sense of three-dimensional planes. They used a lot in Bambi. And you can kind of see it here in that they're sliding these things across at different rates to give a sense that it's a three-dimensional object. So the Fleischers kind of got the ball rolling, and then Disney came up with their multi-plane camera to kind of match that up.
Well, that's so interesting because you see really the different machines give very different effects, even though they're trying to achieve the same thing overall, which is really interesting. So outside of the Fleischers, we probably all heard of Disney since we've just looked at Bambi. So how did Disney get started into big time animation?
So they jumped into the feature animation realm, this was also very new. The idea, because cartoons had been in the theaters, but it was like a short cartoon before you watch a movie.
Yeah.
So the idea of making a feature-length film was very, revolutionary. And so they came out with Snow White was their first one, and it was great, but it cost them $1.5 million to make, which was pretty high for the time. Yeah. But it brought in $14 million, which at the time was pretty huge. Yeah. I mean, that was really a blockbuster and set this whole, a whole cultural movement towards animation, which was wonderful. Yeah. So a year later, the Fleischers decided that they wanted to do a show, and they did Gulliver's Travels, which was a great show, but it didn't have the Seven Dwarfs. So it didn't really have that one character or the characters that kind of pull you in.
I mean, we all have a favorite dwarf. I'm a dopey. I don't know about y'all, but
Interesting. I'm a grumpy guy, but whatever.
I mean, we all, it's like a personality test, right? So,
so they didn't really have that, and they also only had a $700,000 budget. So some of it was like really great animation. Some of it looked like it was kind of rushed, not so great.
Didn't have that Disney dollars, right?
They really didn't. So it pulled in a kind of a disappointing $3.5 million, but on the realm of things, it still did pretty well. Yeah. And that was kind of the pinnacle, I think, of the Fleischers and what they had done.
Yeah. Well, outside of the Fleischers at Disney, who else was an artistic innovator in animation?
Well, okay, so we had the Fleischers kind of kicking off that golden age of animation, is what we like to call it, with Sleeping Beauty and all that. You can't really talk about the second golden age of animation without talking about Don Bluth. So Bluth, he started Disney in 1971. And at the time, Disney Studios was kind of changing the way they were handling animation or movies as a whole. They're moving more towards live action. And they'd only done 3 animated films for the entirety of the 70s, which would have been Robin Hood, Winnie the Pooh, and The Rescuers. And so Don started off as an in-betweener, and he worked through those films.
Wait a minute now. For those of us that don't know, what's an in-betweener?
Oh, okay. In-betweener. In-betweener, it's also, interestingly enough, a job that the Fleischers came up with. Okay. And it's a way of kind of getting an animator to shell out more scenes. So what happens is the animator will draw the key drawing, or the key poses, like a character like this, and then goes like this. So they'll draw these poses, and then an in-betweener draws all the drawings in between to make the movement work.
To get from point A to point B.
Right. And it's great because it keeps the animation rolling as far as production is concerned, and it trains new animators as they go up. So they can kind of learn from these seasoned artists and that kind of thing. Okay. So it works out well. And then he went on and ended up producing or directing the animation for Pete's Dragon, and then the small one, which was a short that Disney had done. Okay.
Well, I'm a child of, I was born in 79, so I grew up in the 80s, and I remember Don Bluth movies that were outside of Disney. And so when did he leave Disney?
Okay, he left Disney on, actually I've got the date, September 13th, 1979. It was a big deal. Wow. He left and took several artists with him. So what was happening
I
at
bet
the
that
time?
was a messy divorce.
It was a really, actually, it was
I bet
really.
there's some tea there, but we'll leave it alone. So
Yeah, we could talk later, but yeah,
Yeah,
it was a
yeah.
very, very
Come
messy
ask him after
divorce.
the presentation. I'll let you
A
know.
lot of press, and it was definitely not a pretty time. But at the time, what was happening is, it said Disney was kind of moving more towards live action,
Mhm.
and they were trying to keep their budgets down on their animation, trying to keep between 3 and 7 million. And so they were doing a lot of things to kind of cut costs. Xerography, which means that they would Xerox the animators' drawings onto the cell and then paint it, as opposed to going and actually inking it in, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They were reusing animation, which actually I've got some here. So taking animation that had been done before and then just kind of reusing the timing and everything for it to do later.
Yeah.
They were cutting down on colors and backgrounds, a lot of things just to kind of keep the cost down.
Yeah.
And this was really hard for Don because animation was his life.
Yeah.
And so when he would bring it up, say, we have to focus more on the artwork. We have to,
Yeah.
Up the colors and do this and do that. He got a lot of pushback, and a lot of it was just like, we can't do that anymore. It's too expensive. It's not possible.
Yeah.
And so that's why he decided to go ahead and leave.
Well, I love that he had so much care and concern for the artistic integrity that he wasn't okay with some of these things, which this hurts my heart a little bit because Robin Hood's my favorite Disney movie, and to watch it be like just a copy of something
And it's
else,
a great
I'm
film.
like,
That's the
oh.
other. These are all really great films.
Yes, yeah, but still, you kind of like, wait. And I've actually seen things on Instagram. I don't know if y'all have seen this, where there's other Disney movies where they put side by side, and it happens too. So I appreciate that. That's maybe why he wanted to move in a different direction. And so, what did he do and said, and how is that a departure from his work at Disney artistically?
Well, he kind of threw himself in completely. And when he started doing his artwork, he really pushed the artistry.
Mhm.
He spent a lot of time with the backgrounds, with effects. Anytime there's little candle lights that are going, or smokes, kind of moving in the background here, or little splashes of water, and all these things here, because it was the artwork was first and foremost him. Whether it worked commercially was kind of secondary, which sometimes worked and sometimes didn't.
Well, and he had opened his own studio, right?
Yeah, he did.
So
and so his.
But you would think he'd be a little more worried about making money, but he was more worried about
which was
the
part
art.
of the problem.
Right.
And so and so his big thing was he wanted to create films that would hit the whole family.
Yeah.
You've got the kids, the teenagers, the parents, the grandparents, all being able to watch them and kind of really pull something out. So he, much like the Fleischers, became that sort of grittier, darker sort of side of the shows. And so he came along.
Well, and you even see such a huge difference between this still from The Secret of NIMH and the ones we just saw in the two Disney movies. Just think about the depth and the color and the quality
and
that you were talking about.
He spent a lot of time on that kind of thing, and that was really his thing.
Yeah.
So when he started off on his own, he had to kind of start making some money.
Yeah.
And so he did a show called Banjo the Woodpaw Cat. Mm-hmm. It's about a little cat that lives on the farm and decides that it needs to leave the farm and go out to the big city. And so he jumps on a feed truck, goes to the big city, eats it, and then spends the film trying to get back home where his family is, and and all that stuff. It was a great little show. It was for TV.
Yeah.
Then he worked on there was a movie called Xanadu. He did the artwork, the animation for that. It was a movie with Olivia Newton-John.
Again, we won't have a sing-along now, but afterwards, if y'all need to sing some Xanadu songs, we can do that. We'll have a little karaoke.
A little bouncing ball for the Xanadu songs. So he did that. But the big one that he came out was Secret of NIMH. That was his. It was kind of like where the rubber hits the road. Yeah. Where it's like, can we really make a quality animated film for that $3 to $7 million budget? And he did. I think it was like $6.5 million that he made for it. Yeah. And what's great about Don is that he really brings you into the environment. As I said, it's the experience that's what's most important for him. Yeah. If we look at this little bit here, it's like the overall feeling that we're getting. It's just very calm, very serene. Everything's okay. There are no problems. Well, what happens is, just to give you a little background, Mrs. Brisby is a little mouse. Her son Timmy is inside the home here, and he's got pneumonia, but they have to try to move him before the plow comes. But now the plows come early. Now she's got to stop the plow.
Get stressed out.
Yeah, it becomes very stressful. But what's interesting,
I remember, I love that movie.
It really kind of hits you. But what's interesting is that he does this with acting and the music and sound and all that stuff, but he also does it with color, because what happens is he changed the color palette as it got more tense. and it went from what was in before was very sort of calming to these sort of deep reds and blacks and sharp contrast to really kind of bring the tension in and make you feel like, oh my gosh, something horrible is happening.
Yeah.
And then when we actually get to the tractor itself and they're trying to stop it, I mean, it looks like she's on fire.
Yeah.
Because he's completely changed the palette, and he's done it in a way where you don't notice the change. You just notice that it's getting more tense.
Yeah.
And then you watch him bring it back from that color palette. And we watch here, once they figure out how to stop the tractor, the color palette will make its change. So she pulls it off there, and it's coming right there.
Yeah.
And the color palette changes completely because the tension's over. We're no longer, in this sort of dire straits.
Yeah.
And
Timmy's okay, y'all. It's
exactly.
Okay.
Timmy's going to be okay.
Sure.
But that's what's great about it is that he used color that we don't even realize to elicit emotion that we kind of needed to have and sort of move along.
Well, I love that because a lot of times we think about movies kind of helping us feel emotion with sound, and we're really familiar with that, but we don't think about animators using color as a medium to help storytell and help evoke emotion out of us, which is so brilliant of him to know how to do, and we don't even realize it's happening to us, but we are being manipulated in a good way, by the color palette that tells us how to feel, which is so interesting.
Well, and that's the thing about animation is that everything has to be designed, everything.
Yeah.
And they could sit down and go, okay, how do we want the audience to feel here? They'll have what's called an emotional beat board. Well, they'll have, color keys of all the different parts of the film, and then a little, string that says, okay, they're going to be up here, they're going to be down here, and kind of work its way through to help sort of move that story along. And that's the great thing I love about animation is that you can craft all of it as it moves.
I think people really undervalue all of the artistic decisions that go into animation. I think a lot of times when we see other visual mediums, we automatically give them more credit for whatever reason. I know at least I have, and you just miss all these subtle decisions that are being made by artists who are really fabulous storytellers, incredibly well-trained drawers and painters and all these other things. And so it really helps heighten the artistry of all this in a really cool way.
Right. So Nim did okay in the theaters. I think it made $14.5 million, something like that. So it did okay.
Yeah. Yay, Timmy.
Yeah, but it wasn't quite where it needed to be.
Yeah.
And so he moved on to do other things. He did a series of video games because that's the other thing. It was kind of innovative for the time. Video games we had like Pac-Man and Defender and that kind of thing, very flat. Well, he came with this idea that he could animate an entire show about, say, Dirk the Daring saving this princess, from the dragon. And what would happen is you watch the whole animation unfold, and you can go left, right, up, down, sword, and you had to do it at just the right moment. So click which way you wanted to go, kind of like choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
And if you did it right, then the animation would continue. You can watch the adventure, go on. You hit the wrong thing, then it would cut to a different bit of animation where you kind of end up dying in these horrible ways.
Yeah.
So that went on and did really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so he continued to kind of come up with ways to sort of pay for the studio and keep things moving along. He also did a show called Space Ace in the game.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Now I know he did other movies too, so
he did.
I'm familiar with a few more.
Well, let's see. He went on and American Tail, this is when he hooked up with Steven Spielberg.
You thought you were worried about Timmy. Now this is gonna make you cry too.
Which goes back to one of the great things about Don, the way he did things. So he hooked up with Steven Spielberg to do American Tail, and just like everything else, it had this these really intense, sad moments where he's
to sing along with that too.
He's singing about missing his family and trying to find them, and maybe
there.
Somewhere they're there, but I don't have them. And it really kind of he never talked down to the audience.
Yeah.
It was always very kind of like, here's what's going on, in a very adult way. But then you move along and you'd have this amazing moment. You get to the end of the film, if you're not crying, you're dead inside.
Exactly. Exactly. We're gonna play it and see.
We're watching all of you.
Yeah.
But that's Don. And that's kind of how he did things. Yeah. And it was the same thing with his next film with Steven, which was The Land Before Time, where you had these moments that were super tense and very dark and very frightening.
So stressful.
And a lot of the studios were like, no, we can't put up there. That's too scary for kids. And that's not what he thinks. He was like, well, I think it's important. And we want to hit the whole family. And I think that this is good for them. Because he would intersperse that with these really tender, touching moments that kind of...
Everybody giving, there we go,
for that kind of thing. So it's Don. It's just kind of the way he did.
Yeah.
But they weren't all hits. He and Steven kind of split up. Steven started doing his own thing, and he went on and did.
Did he do okay, that Steven? I guess he was all right later.
Oh no,
Steven
he did.
Spielberg.
Oh yeah,
he
no,
did all right.
they got along well. Steven seemed to move on and do okay, which I'm grateful for him because they started DreamWorks. So
okay, yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah,
that was my first job.
Yeah.
But he did like All Dogs Go to Heaven, Rockadoodle, which was sort of Glenn Campbell did the music for it, and there's some live action and animation there. Thumbelina, Troll in Central Park. So a bunch of different films, but none of them did very well.
Yeah.
And they actually started to lose money. And so this was kind of the harder part of his career where it's like, where do you go from here? And
like artistically, he's getting to do what he wants.
Yeah.
But it's not making money.
He also was facing stiff competition because after Land Before Time, Disney said, you know what, this is lucrative.
Yeah.
And so they decided to put out one film starting with Little Mermaid, one film every year.
Yeah.
And so we talked about that Little Mermaid was the beginning of that second golden age of animation.
Yeah.
But really it was Don Bluth with Secret of Nim that kind of kicked off that second golden age of animation and went all the way through to Tarzan and that kind of thing.
But Bluth actually had one really big commercial success.
He did. Once he kind of hit the low here, but then Fox came to him and they wanted him to run their animation studio.
Yeah.
And so he took over, and his first film out of the gate was Anastasia. Which was a great film, and it actually became the highest grossing non-Disney animated film. And so he was kind of back up on top there, really doing some great stuff. And he was doing what he does, which once again it gets very dark, but it's beautiful.
Grit we were talking about,
that grit that we're talking about, but it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, all the little effects and the lights and the smoke and just all these little things that we don't really notice. He wanted to make sure he kind of put in there to kind of really get the audience pulled into it.
Yeah.
So you've got that sort of darker moment along with these really great touching moments that kind of connect you to the characters. And he did that just because he wouldn't compromise his quality for animation and stuff in the stories that he wanted to tell.
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, your personal story intersects with Don Bluth.
It does.
So tell us about that.
All right. So Don is actually my mom's cousin. And so
it's very Livingston, right?
Of course, this is Pasadena, but he's my mom's cousin. And I remember when I was a kid, about 4 years old, and my sister taught me how to draw a dog. And I don't know if you've all done this, where like the head's kind of shaped like this, and you got a couple eyes, some floppy ears, and a little tongue that sticks out. Yeah. Anyway, so I was super excited. I was going to show him, look what I can do. So he came over for dinner, and I'm like, look what I can do, and I drew this dog for him. And he's like, wow, that's amazing. But what if we took it and he started drawing stuff? We turned to the side and we gave it a ski hat and some ski poles. And he came up with this whole story around this dog that is now skiing and all this stuff. And I remember thinking, wow, that's what I want to do. I don't want to be just an artist. I want to be an animation artist. I want to be able to tell stories. I want to be able to really learn, this craft and kind of follow along, what he was doing.
Yeah. Well, and I really am appreciative of you telling that story, because I think that is so much the heart of this organization is to help support arts education for young people, give them access to experiences like that early on in their life, because it changed the whole trajectory of your life. To be introduced to somebody who could connect you with art, open up possibilities, show you that it was an actual career field and not just a hobby, and something to take seriously. And so I really appreciate that is part of your story as well.
But it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the thing that I was facing at the time, because what the studios wanted to see was figure drawing and animal drawing. They wanted to make sure you could draw the figure correctly and realistically, and that you can draw animals correctly and realistically. Because if you can draw something hyper realistic, then you can draw cartoons. But just because you can draw cartoons doesn't mean you can do Anastasia or Prince of Egypt or something that's more hyper realistic. So you needed to be able to draw. Yeah. The problem was I couldn't afford to go to college.
Yeah.
So art school is very expensive.
Yeah.
And so what I did, because I had to so I just would pick up books and study and draw and study. And then there was an art college that was nearby called the Art Center College of Design, super expensive, prestigious college that was kind of near where I lived. And I just would sneak in and sit in the back of classes.
Wait, you stole education?
I would literally sneak in. Like life drawing classes, because that's what I needed was life drawing.
I mean, that's
and
impressive.
I would just sort of sit in the back there and be like, oh, I'm just auditing,
Yeah.
And teachers would come by and like, oh, work on this, work on that. And I'm like, okay, great, just to get I didn't need the degree. I needed
Yeah.
the instruction.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what was so important for me, is like, I just needed that instruction. So,
well, and I really appreciate you sharing that too, because one of our missions is to support young artists. And even with some of the competitions that we have, we were able to give some scholarships to tech and
Awesome.
other things that are part of that. And so we are trying to make sure that people like you out there that want access to school get it. And so that's really one of the heart of our
that's really
organization.
important, because that's where you make connections with
Yeah.
other artists, and you're really able, because you can be doing it on your own is one thing, but you have to go in front of another artist. They can look at it and go, wow, that's awful.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what happened. I would submit, get rejected, and I'd call them and say, what didn't you like? And they're more than happy to tell you.
Yeah.
And then I go and work on that and submit and get rejected, submit, get rejected. You had to develop a really thick skin.
For sure.
And finally, I ended up getting picked up over at DreamWorks
Yeah.
on their training program.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we're in a little short of time. So can you just give us some highlights of some of the things that you were able to work on as part of DreamWorks in your career?
Yeah. I was at DreamWorks, and I ended up working on Prince of Egypt. There was a TV show called Toonsylvania. I'd worked in the story department for that for a while. If you want to hear stories on that, I got plenty. El Dorado, Spirit, Tigger movie, Rugrats Go Wild, Lion King 2, Ventures in Odyssey. I was directing and producing for a while. Then I was over at ABC Mouse for like 12 years doing their I was animating their characters in the zoo, and then animating their other characters. Ran the games team for a while, so did all their game artwork and animation and that kind of stuff. And
like Don Bluth, you opened your own studio.
And not quite like that, but yes, I did. Yes. I did. I realized I'm kind of a dinosaur in the industry now, and so I kind of leaned into it with Old Guy Studios. And it's been a lot of fun. I'll do some logo design, character design, animation, game design, that kind of stuff, and I just have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. Well, and also I know you've been a teacher at different places as well, giving back in a way that you weren't able to have access to yourself, which I think is great. So I got two more questions as we finish tonight.
Okay.
So one, if we are not well versed in animation, in your opinion, what is an animated film that really best showcases the artistry of animation? I know that's like choosing your favorite child, so I know that's really unfair. I'm just acknowledging that, but give us one that we should go watch to really see the art of animation.
Okay, I'm gonna have to just give you a couple thoughts.
Okay.
So if you're thinking Disney, it'd have to be Sleeping Beauty. Absolutely gorgeous. The backgrounds are amazing.
Yeah.
The way the artwork kind of fits in, they wanted to make it look like those old tapestries. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Secret of NIMH is one you have to go watch. I'd have to say it's one of the best animated films of all time. It really is. And then I worked on Prince of Egypt. That's my favorite, so you want to check that one out.
Well, we got to support you, right?
That actually was my favorite project. It was the first thing I did. I love that film.
Nice.
So.
Well, as we close out, what would you say, or what advice would you give for organizations like ours that are trying to support artists and art education?
The biggest thing is I love that you're introducing people to the arts, because that's a big thing. Is one, helping people understand that it is a career path, and there is more to it. I get a lot of, for me, luckily growing up, I was surrounded by it. And it was like, this can be a career. This can be something you can do. And then helping these students kind of be able to achieve that, get their education is a wonderful thing. And I think that's really the big thing is helping them understand that this is actually a path they could take, and then giving them some tools to be able to gain that education to do it is wonderful.
Well, we just really appreciate having role models like you that are part of our community, and that they can look up to and see somebody who has made a life from this and who loved it enough to do it even when it was hard and pursue it, but also has found a way to make it their life's work. And so we just appreciate you coming and talking to us today.
Oh, thank you.
Again, as always, if you have more questions for Chad, which there are many I'm sure that you all have along the way, please come up, talk to him afterwards, enjoy talking with each other, go get more wine, more drink. But thank you all so much for coming today. And let's give Chad a hand.
Thanks. Thank you.